with the potential news, it is just reports at the moment that 153 Test All Black, double Rugby World Cup winner, you cannot forget the legacy of this man. Sam Whitelock has been playing his rugby over in France at Pau with his younger brother. We thought he was done with New Zealand rugby. We thought he was done with the All Blacks, but it turns out a conversation has been had between him and the new coach, Scott Robertson, and maybe he's not quite done with international rugby yet. Clayton just said it's a fine balancing act. Where does everyone sit with this news? Would you be happy to welcome back this legend into the environment, or do we not actually need him, JK?
Oh, I'm in favour. I think it's a positive. I'm in favour of Bowden and Whitelock coming back. Will they start? I don't think so. But do they come off the bench? Do they get through to the next World Cup? I hope so. You know, we saw it, you know, with Coles coming on late. Who do you want? Someone with experience. And I think what we've got to realise is that a lot of our players are leaving. So we've got 660 players overseas. So to lose that experience for the All Blacks, we've got to win in between World Cups as well as the next World Cup. So, you know, I'm in favour.
Can I just come back to something you said there? You think that Sam Whitelock could make the next Rugby World Cup? Australia 2027, he'd be 40. You think he can make the All Blacks team?
Why not?
What does that say about the current locking stocks in New Zealand then?
Well, I don't think he starts.
But do we not have good enough players? I mean, we've been talking about Josh Ward.
For me, it's like if you are fit and good enough, does he start? No, but the last 15 of the next World Cup, it's going to be close. Who do you want running on? Someone with 20 Test matches or someone with 152?
I think it depends on how they're using him. I think, I don't know whether, man, he's a legend of the game, you know, the most kept All Black of all time, but how are they going to use him? We're obviously in a period where there's a possibility that we're down in terms of that experience in our locking department, and he's huge. So to have him in that environment, if he's good enough and he's in there and he's beating the other guys, which I don't kind of think will kind of happen in the next 3 or so years. His immediate job, obviously, is to try and get these guys up to speed, because the IP that he's got and the experience is huge. That's world class. And so if they're bringing him back purely for that, and if he's good enough to play above these other young guys, then you play him.
Jeff, I remember something that you said last year. You were worried about losing Sam Whitelock and his IP, what Mills talks about, because you thought he was the last student of the game in that position.
The best student of the game that we've had at the line-out time for a long, long time, probably if ever. What he brought to the All Blacks and what he brought to the Crusaders. And so there's no doubt that that's something the All Blacks are looking at and going, we see real value in that. So the question mark I have here is that how often are you prepared to start doing this when players who head off overseas and say Lester Whainganuku decides at the end of this season in France, you know what, didn't really like it here, I'm now off contract. Beauden Barrett was always coming back. His is a sabbatical situation, so they're vastly different scenarios, right? Sam Whitelock's got, I think, another option, another year. That was part of this at Pau. He goes, I want to come back and play. Now, it's whether or not you're comfortable players walking straight back into the All Blacks. Now, I know you are.
At 152 tests, I totally am.
Yeah,
Leicester, no.
Yeah, well, I just understand it. So these are doors that I know Scott Robertson has talked about in terms of maybe opening these and looking at players. I think he went through Japan and had a chat to Richie Mo'unga, OK? So he's looking and keeping in touch with some of these players to see maybe whether or not their circumstances are changing. The issue I have is if we go down this path and all of a sudden you welcome all these players back in, how much is this devaluing Super Rugby? So these superstars... no, I'm just saying, let me just finish. You're devaluing it because these players all of a sudden get a choice to go, what? I can go and play up until July overseas, and then all of a sudden I'm a free agent, come back and play a few games maybe to qualify, which you can do, play a few games like TJ Perenara did, Damien McKenzie did. They come and played a few games of club rugby, provincial rugby. They're available for the All Blacks again. Are we comfortable with players doing that, just deciding halfway through the year, I'm coming back?
Not every player I'm not comfortable with, but if I can just go back to something about what you said about devaluing Super Rugby. If you have players resting from their works, if you have players going away on sabbaticals, you're not that worried about Super Rugby. All you're worried about is the All Blacks, and that has been the case. We know that. It's the high-performance pool for the All Blacks. Until we change that, and I think it needs to be changed, you know, we need to extend Super Rugby, we need to have a competition where they can keep the television rights, the famous Heineken Cup that I keep talking about. And I know that you've been talking about changing the pay system. Until we let the Super Rugby teams stand on their own, they're going to be high performers for the All Blacks. And I don't like it, but it's been working for us.
I'm actually, in terms of the Sam Whitelock thing, Mills, I look at this and go, this is a really tough year for Scott Robertson to start.
Yeah.
Really challenging season. A couple of test matches in South Africa. There's an end of year tour which involves playing Ireland and England and France, plus another
And
two.
Italy.
And Italy, and Italy, and Japan. So there's all of these things, you know. England are coming here. They were semi-finals in Rugby World Cup. So you add all these things up. Would he be really valuable right now for this season? I think
Just
so.
for a year.
And so for us, now that's where I can feel really comfortable. I don't think Rugby World Cup at 40. That's a bit beyond. I think that's a bit beyond my imagination. Maybe in your imagination, but not in my imagination. But in terms of what he could offer for a season to play maybe 6 or 7 test matches, if he's on top of his game, I think really valuable.
Case by case, I think, and he's a perfect case, right? If you're going to bring him back and he's good enough to be in that environment to get... You've got to also remember, we've lost Retallick.
Well, why don't you just bring Brodie Retallick back then?
Oh, he's not the most kept All Black ever. And possibly...
younger.
Yeah.
Yeah, but look, I think every story is different, Kirst. You know, I think that Brodie's apparently very happy in Japan and wants to finish his career there. You know, I think Whitelock wanted to go and play with his brother. I mean, playing in France 37 games a year, getting the, you know, kicked out of you every week is not Japan, right? Japan, we all know, is a little bit easier. So
We shouldn't forget last year how good he was as a rugby
unbelievable.
coming off the bench. He was outstanding.
Yeah.
And so he actually found
What about
some of
the
his best
moment
form for
against
years.
Ireland?
So I'm not doubting if he was in that sort of health and condition and form, if he comes back from France like that, you know.
You'd be okay with it for a year.
I'd be okay for it for a year, but I don't want this to become the norm. I don't.
Yeah, but are you saying you don't want it to be the norm, or is it the devaluing of the Super Rugby?
If we played our Super Rugby players properly, we wouldn't have this problem.
Okay, but if it's a 150 test match like Whitelock, so I don't think you can make the comparison to Leicester, because he left early. Well, how many tests has he had? 10.
And I accept that.
So let's put 80 test matches on it and you can come back when you want, or 100. It's only 4 people, isn't it? Mills, you can come back.
No way, man.
You're about the same age right now, aren't you?
Hey?
We could keep having this conversation over and over, couldn't we? But it is a really great debate to have. Time for